Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News channel. Now, today we're going to do kind of like a Bitcoin price prediction, and we're going to see why Bitcoin can possibly reach 50, even 60K in April. Now, some of you might think that sounds insane, but hear me out. There is specific reasons why we could actually get to 60K in April. But I don't think it's extremely likely, but there's definitely a bit of a possibility. If you just look at the Bitcoin Google Trends, it's pretty bad. You can see the interest of Bitcoin actually rose to about 100 on May 16th through 22nd, and right now it's at 25, which is pretty much an all-time low for the last year. And if you look at like YouTube views and like new retail investors, the interest is just not there. I'm not really sure why the interest rose to 54 on January 23rd and then quickly came down. I think this was a little bit because of the war. But as you can see, as soon as the war started, Bitcoin's interest came just flagging down. And that's because of a lot of factors. People are afraid of like inflation, but that's one, and they think the war is going to exacerbate inflation, which it has. It also has exacerbated the price of oil. Now you might be saying, well, doesn't inflation help Bitcoin? Isn't it a hedge against inflation? Not exactly. You have to remember Bitcoin is an investable asset and it's a high risk asset according to most people. And you have to remember that investments are not most of America's first priority. Most of America's first priority is like putting food on the table and having a place to live, and investments is extra money after that. So rising inflation doesn't help Bitcoin because a lot of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck. So when you actually take that into account, you realize that the money that people put into Bitcoin and crypto comes after all the basically living costs. And when inflation goes up, you have more living costs. Your salary doesn't go up quite as much. So you're actually having less money left over to invest in Bitcoin. Or some people are even in the red and they're having to sell cryptocurrency to make up for their costs. There are many people that actually have to do that. So that's why interest in Bitcoin has actually waned as economic pressures have ratcheted up, and especially since the war has exacerbated fears. So generally, fear and uncertainty in the market is generally not very good for Bitcoin. I think we've already reached the maximum of that, though. People are settling in and they're getting used to the idea of a longer lasting Russia Ukraine war, and they're getting more used to the idea of inflation lasting for probably at least half of this year, not if not more. And the interest rate hikes have settled in too. I think they're actually seeing the Fed as okay, the Fed is hiking interest rates to try to control this inflation. We'll have things kind of calm down by the end of this year. So they're kind of having more of a settled mindset, but they're also preparing for a year of pain. So they're not very interested in risky investable assets. Now, that all sounds really bad for Bitcoin. But the thing is, we do have some good news. Because things have kind of stabled down, and there is still a portion of America, especially people in tech, which is more likely to invest in crypto anyways, are actually making more money. Their salaries are going up pretty much the same rate as inflation, and some of them even have more money left over. So they'll actually be investing more. Plus, other countries like Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine are pouring some money into crypto now because their own currency is very unstable, especially for the Russian ruble, and they're looking for other ways to actually expand crypto. And the thing is, Russia has gotten desperate enough to accept Bitcoin from China, Turkey, and other friendly countries to actually buy their gas. So there's excitement for Bitcoin because there's more uses for Bitcoin. But let's actually talk about one huge reason. So it's going to be about Terra again. The founder of Terra, or Do Kwon, has said he will buy $10 billion in Bitcoin for UST reserves. Now, whether that makes UST centralized, decentralized, whatever, that's not the point of this video. I'm not really going to discuss that. But that's very good for Bitcoin. Now, he's obviously not going to buy 10 billion at once. So far, I believe he's bought about $250 million. Now, $250 million, if you spread it over the course of a month, like $10 million a day, that's not really going to affect the market. But that's not really what Do Kwon is doing. He's transferring $125 million of Tether all at once into like a Tether account, and he's buying basically all at once as well. So as you can see, like, these giant candles, I think a lot of people are suspecting because it correlates with the $125 million worth of Tether that he actually went into that account, and he's actually using that wallet to actually buy Bitcoin. So like these candles right here and right here happened right afterwards. So people are very much speculating that these spikes in volume are him buying, $60 million at once or $125 million at once. And buying 60 million or 125 million all at once within the span of a couple of minutes is enough to actually push Bitcoin up a couple thousand points. Now, some people are speculating that here on the 22nd, he actually bought $125 million at once. And that basically brought it up from 40,000 to about 43,000. Like 3,000 increase for basically a buy of 3,000 Bitcoins in the span of a couple of minutes. You can see these giant basically volume spikes here for buying. That's basically straight buying up. That is definitely possible, and some people are speculating that he spent half of that here and then half of that here. Because remember, he transacted $125 million twice, and he actually he could be actually spending about 60 here and 60 here, and this pumped it from 42,700 to 44,000, and this went from 43,000 to 44,000. So this was like $1,000. This was $1,000. You have an increase of just over $2,000 towards the top right now. And of course, after each subsequent buy, there's going to be some retail sellers that want to take profit, but they don't sell back down to the original value. Now, I don't really know the length of Do Kwon's buys, but the thing is, we know that he's only bought 250 million and he wants to buy 10 billion. Now, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, as he buys, of course, he's going to have to buy less and less Bitcoin, and that'll have a less and less effect on the market. But generally, an increase in 10-20% isn't really going to affect that much. And I think he's going to have to buy hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin to actually reach his goal. If not really millions of Bitcoin, but at least hundreds of thousands of BTC to actually reach his goal. And that will definitely have a series of sequential pumps in terms of Bitcoin price. So the first one brought us up from 41,000 to 43,000. Then it dropped back down to about, 42,000. The next one, we went from 42.5 and maybe we went to 45 and now it's dropped to 43, 44. We might actually even out at 43.5. And then the next one he pumps, it'll be from 43.5 maybe to 46, 47,000. And I think what that will do is actually get retail investors interested in crypto again, despite the inflation. Because remember, I said richer Americans that have tech jobs or higher paying jobs, their salaries kind of have kept almost in pace with inflation. They have just as much leftover money. When they see Bitcoin going up, they're going to want to buy into it as well. Plus, institutions are actually coming in. So Do Kwon's basically step buys can actually revitalize interest in Bitcoin, especially once those step buys get past 50 and 55,000. Now, will it get past 55,000? I'm not really sure if it'll actually get past 55,000 and what his timing and sequencing of buys is. But remember, he's only transferring 125 million at a time. He wants to buy 10 billion. He's bought 250 million so far. If he, let's say, buys a billion within the next 15 days to a month, which is very, very possible because he's basically bought 250 million within the span of 4 or 5 days. If he buys a billion within the span of the next 20 days, that's essentially 8 sequential buys of 125 million. You're thinking maybe as it goes up, it gets harder to go up, but you're still averaging maybe $2,000 per pump of 125 million. That's $16,000 worth of pump. From right now, that's over $60,000. So that is how we'll get over $60,000. But it's not only from him. Because like I said, once Bitcoin reaches a certain value, I think 50, 55,000, more retail interest is going to come in and they're going to want to FOMO in and not miss out. So Do Kwon's buys actually set a primer for retail to actually be interested and come back in. And that could actually push us to 50, 60,000 or an all-time high in April, possibly May, based on the schedule of his buys. Now, that's all dependent on Putin doesn't go insane and starts using weapons of mass destruction, because that'll be a big sell signal on the market. I think a lot of the Fed interest rates, even at 50 basis points in May, has actually been priced in, so I don't really see that affecting it that much. And I think these buys from Terra Luna actually prime the market for maybe even a mini bull run coming in April, possibly May, depending on his schedule. Because I believe without his buys, we would probably still be down at $41,000, $42,000 and not where we are now. Yes, we are still up from the lows of the invasion. I think that set a bottom. But Terra Luna's buys and whale watchers tracking like what he's actually doing with the wallets and Tether is actually helping. And like I said, he's not buying a little bit at a time. He's basically buying all at once. At least that's kind of what the indicators say. He's basically buying with 125 million all at once. Once he does that, yes, you can see like it does come down a little bit, but it does not go down to where he actually started. So he gets like a pump up, and it drops down about half. But even with that, he pumps it several $1,000s every single time. He basically gives it a 1,500 point boost or a 2,000 point boost each time. And I think if he continuously does it, people will kind of see a step pattern and they'll think we're actually in an ascending triangle or a step pattern up. And based on that, they will do their TA and everything, and that will have a psychological effect on the market and grab people to actually come back in. So that's why I don't think a prediction of 50, 55,000, even 60,000 is that reckless for end of April, even late May, because of Do Kwon's buys and because of the psychological advantage that gives Bitcoin in bringing retail investors back in as the price gets higher. Do I think we will be able to abstain all-time highs above 60, 70,000? No, I don't think so. And I think if we go to 60, 70,000, and if the altcoins really start running, it's probably a really good time to sell, because unless the economic uncertainty just vaporizes, essentially, and all this goes away, and Russia magically makes peace with Ukraine, there's still going to be downward pressure on the market. There's going to be downward pressure on Americans having to sell Bitcoin to make ends meet. And there's going to be kind of a damper on people's view of, well, not people's view of Bitcoin, but damper on people's spending habits, which we actually need as long as these economic uncertainties last. And I think they'll last for most of this year. So there is a possibility of us going up to 50, 60,000, maybe even an all-time high in April or May, and then dumping back down to the mid 40s. And that is a good chance for some arbitrage and some profit. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.